Hi everyone, Tony Costa here from Toronto Apologetics. So glad that you could join us. If you haven't subscribed already to Toronto Apologetics, we'd like to encourage you to do so and also to like the video and to share it. Also want to introduce you to my new friends. You've probably seen them before, and the lamb over there. He wants to get into reading books, and he's got his eyeglasses on, and that's Lamb Chop over there. And then we got this other little guy here. He's doing his Bible study. That is the little whale. And if you have not heard already, we already have selected a name for him, and his name is Willie, the Prince of Wales. Willie, the Prince of Wales. And so they want to get into the limelight as well. So they're also going to be on this video. So today I want to talk about the situation, the reeling that everyone's been going through since last week when um, Charlie Kirk was martyred, murdered, killed. And of course, a lot of people are trying to say it was a political assassination. No, that was not a political assassination. He was not. He was not following. He was not in any particular capacity as a politician. He was not running for office. He was a Christian and someone who believed in conservative values and someone who believed in the Constitution of the United States, which is rooted in a Judeo-Christian understanding that all men are created equal. They're given certain inalienable rights by their creator. And that understanding that morality and purpose and meaning and value are rooted in God himself. And so there's a lot of language that's been tossed to and fro. This was not a political assassination. This was a demonic, deviant, premeditated murder. And yes, Charlie Kirk was a Christian martyr. He died for his convictions that Jesus Christ was the way, the truth, and the life. And he died for the conviction that that truth is what sets us free, knowing Christ and knowing our place in God's overall purpose and grand design for us. There was an interesting post that was placed on Twitter by a professor from the University of Wisconsin, and I was uh, quite excited about it because this professor had the guts to come out, probably even at the peril of his own employment, at the peril of his own jobs. Most universities today are run by Marxist ideologies. Many of the universities today, this is why they promote a lot of the woke ideologies, the leftist ideologies. Not only they promote them, they pay people to propagate ideologies such as these. And this has been going on for quite a while. It is something that has been in the works since the early 20th century in the 1920s. And then, of course, with the rise of the Frankfurt School and the whole cultural Marxism that has invaded every aspect of our existence in our life. I'll be actually delivering a lecture next Saturday, September 27th, in Toronto. Um, and I'll be delivering a lecture on cultural Marxism and the battle for truth. Now, this lecture, unfortunately, is not going to be recorded, so it will not be placed on YouTube. It will be a in-house gathering. It'll be held at Park Lawn Baptist Church in Toronto at 246 Park Lawn Road in Etobicoke, which is a suburb of Toronto, but amalgamated within the city of Toronto as well. So I'll be addressing that and addressing some of the ideologies that led to the murder and martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. You have to understand, folks, that ideas have consequences. Ideas have consequences. And the idea in Tyler Robinson's head to get rid of Charlie Kirk because he didn't like what he stood for, he didn't like what he said. Um, that, of course, is pure evil. That in a country like the United States, where freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is the very First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, the fact that that First Amendment is enshrined as one of America's greatest um, uh, rights, that is the right to free speech. You can say whatever you want. The only exception is you do not cry fire in a crowded theater. You don't incite violence or insurrection. Um, but you have the freedom to speak evil of the president. You have the right to speak evil of police officers. You'll have people saying some expletives right in front of police officers. That is protected under the First Amendment of the United States. That is freedom of speech. And with that freedom of speech, you always find the the um, the consequences of offending, because that's what free speech does. That's the cost of free speech. You may be offended, but being offended is not a right. You have a right to turn the TV off or turn the radio dial. If you don't like something, you don't have to listen to it. You don't have to participate in it if you don't want to. And so what we see here is an assault um, on the very roots of the United States Constitution, the freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and so on. And so when people start complaining about, just recently, Jimmy Kimmel Live, Jimmy Kimmel was indefinitely suspended after he made some remarks about the killer Tyler Robinson being MAGA, even though all the evidence has shown he's not. He was leftist leaning. He was involved in a relationship with another man who was identifying as a woman and in the process of transitioning. And his whole idea was, well, we need to get rid of Charlie Kirk because I don't like what he says. And yet, people who have been rejoicing and applauding the death of Charlie Kirk, a lot of these folks, a lot of them have actually been fired. They've lost their jobs, and people have complained that, well, isn't this unfair? Why would Jimmy Kimmel? It's not fair that he was let go because of what he said. But then again, no one seems to talk about the fact that Tim Allen was let go because of his conservative stance. No one talks about um, people like Tucker Carlson, who was fired from Fox News, and Jimmy Kimmel went on Twitter and just was rejoicing and gloating uh, um, about Tucker Carlson being let go. And then Roseanne Barr as well was fired because of a tweet she made, and it went so far as Barack Obama and his wife uh, calling ABC and demanding her resignation and having her fired and so on. And the list can go on and on and on. Even here in Canada, Don Cherry, a noble Canadian, a truly a true patriot in Canada, was fired uh, by by Hockey Night in Canada for making the statement that people who don't respect the war dead, here in Canada, much like Commonwealth nations, we wear a poppy during the days preceding November 11th, Remembrance Day, what we call it here in Canada, Remembrance Day. And what he was saying was, you people should wear the poppy. And everyone said, well, what does he mean by you people? He's referring to non-Canadians. He's referring to immigrants and so forth. Just for that statement, just for Don Cherry saying, you people, he lost his job. Why is no one clamoring about that? They were very, very quick to applaud and say, yes, we got to get rid of these haters and so on. But for some reason, when Jimmy Kimmel loses his job, it's all of a sudden it's a federal case. The same man, Jimmy Kimmel, who gloated over Tucker Carlson losing his job. And we can go down the list. It's not just Tim Allen and Roseanne Barr. We can bring in many other people who lost their jobs simply for declaring their conservative values and position. So what I wanted to do here is I wanted to share this posting by this professor from the University of Wisconsin with you. And I'm going to start right from the beginning here. I just like to read through this. So This is from Trevor Michael Tomish, and he says, I'm a university professor here in Wisconsin. Obligatory disclaimer, these views are mine alone and do not reflect the views of the University of Wisconsin system. The fact that Charlie was killed on a college campus for expressing his opinions and ideas, the one place in society what's sole purpose is to express opinions and ideas, should be a watershed moment for all universities. And that's absolutely true. The fact that he was killed on a college campus at the University of Utah, Utah, the fact that he was killed on a campus for expressing his opinions and ideas. This is the birthplace of free speech, of course, being the Constitution, but universities were the bastions of free speech. They were the bastions of freedom of expression. Even academic professors had freedom of speech. They had the right to say things that may be controversial, but they have academic freedom. Not anymore. Not anymore. He goes on to say every single member of every single university community, faculty, administrators, staff, and students should be lamenting this as it spells the death of the university, which I totally agree. There should have immediately been a press release from every school in the United States condemning this act of ideological violence. Students should have been told about the gravity of this situation. And of course, as you can see, that's not what we saw. That is definitely not what we saw. We saw almost silence. The ones that were reporting on this were media outlets that were addressing this issue, and to their credit. But how many universities just remain quiet about it? And governments remain quiet about it. Here in Canada, in the Parliament in Ottawa, the House of Commons, there was no moment of silence to remember Charlie Kirk. In fact, they refused to do that. But for George Floyd, when he died, they took time to remember him, because you see, the death of George Floyd, a convicted criminal, somebody who had a criminal record and even pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's belly as he was robbing her, that fits the narrative of the left, because whenever the left picks on color, it immediately jumps on it and flies with it, and it fits the narrative. You have a minority, you have someone who is considered an oppressed person, but then when you match that with the killing of that poor Ukrainian girl who got killed in a train by an African American assailant, the media just didn't talk about it. They just went silent. Why? Well, because it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the narrative of the white person being the oppressor and everyone else is the oppressed. When those roles are changed, it doesn't fit the media narrative. And so they don't want to talk about it. This is why most people today can't trust the media. They can't trust the media because the media is ideologically driven. It is driven by a narrative, and that is this Marxist narrative, the idea of the oppressor being the white heterosexual, the white European male, heterosexual, Christian, and everyone else is the oppressed. And so what this does is it creates this idea, this narrative, and the media has been compromised. And that is why many Americans and Canadians they're turning to independent media sources like here in Canada, we have Rebel News and True North. And so those guys are going to go into it, they're going to look at both sides. They don't have a narrative to spin. They just want to look at the facts, just the facts. That's what journalism used to be about back in the days with Albert Cronkite and others. Not anymore. Not anymore. It's all based on ideology. Now, he goes on to say here, Professor Thomas, he says, faculty should have been coached on how to explain what freedom of speech looks like, and every classroom should have an entire lecture devoted to why and what Charlie was doing was fundamental to the fabric of American society. On the contrary, what we have is we have recordings of teachers saying that Charlie Kirk deserved to die. And so when people try to defend folks like Jimmy Kimmel and saying, well, he shouldn't be fired because of words that he said. Well, being fired for words that you said is not the same as being killed and taken down by firing a gun for words that you spoke. Charlie Kirk was put down because of what he said, of what he stood for, a right that he had, constitutionally protected. And so what you're basically saying is, I feel bad for someone who got fired for saying horrible things about Charlie Kirk and his family, but you don't feel terrible for Charlie Kirk who lost his life for words that he spoke? There's something wrong, not just with America. There's something wrong here with the West. Terribly wrong. And it's this poison is taken over the West. And right now in the United Kingdom, the fact that Bible Gateway has been banned in the United Kingdom and the European Union, we are seeing this is a dystopian universe we're living in. This is George Orwell, 1984. Think about it. Bible Gateway has been blocked for safety concerns. Since when is the Bible being censored? He goes on to say, instead, hundreds of professors and students celebrated and continued to celebrate. And that's what they did. Now, he goes on to say, to date, there has been no statement from my university or the University of Wisconsin system. Not a word. Not a single one of my students heard from any of their professors about this. Now, again, just compare this to the George Floyd situation, where cities were burned down, police cars were burned, people were killed, people were injured. And now you compare it to what happened to Charlie Kirk, and what are people doing? They're congregating and coming together to do what? To pray, to have vigils, to sing Amazing Grace across the United States and parts of Canada. You see the difference? One brings about looting and violence and burning and destruction. The other one brings about time of reflection, praying, and honoring this man's memory. He goes on to say, how do I know? I asked them. Not only did I ask them, but I gave them a 50-minute lecture about why this moment is one of the darkest in American history and how we must pull back from this and encourage dialogue, or the American project is dead. Conservative students and faculty are taking this silence on behalf of administrators as an endorsement of violence against them. And so when you are silent, then what that indicates is that indicates assent. You're silently saying you agree with it. So for someone to be killed and taken out just for speaking, I mean, think about it. Charlie Kirk went into university settings. He went into higher education centers, universities, colleges, to engage people, even those who disagreed with him. He was willing to engage them. But because you don't like what he said, you think it's right to take someone out like that? Who in their right mind is going to, if we disagree with everything that everyone else says and we start thinking that violence is the best way to stop them, we're going to live in a world of, this will become a killing field if we apply that standard. He goes on to say, when little 5'4" 96-pound grandma sister Cindy Smock came to our campus to talk to kids about Jesus, they had sent out a campus-wide email telling the students that if they need to talk about their traumatic experience, that counselors are available and there's a safe space where they can go to cry and play with toys. They then assembled a task force to determine how to handle people like Cindy and the trauma she inflicts on students. When has this ever happened in the history of academia? This is something that has arisen in the last couple of decades. This was not always the case. And so to have this little woman come and speak at the campus, and this necessitates having counselors on hand and traumatic experiences. I mean, think of what happened to Jordan Peterson as well at the University of Toronto, where they were doing the same thing. When he gave a lecture and a talk, they had traumatic experience counselors on scene to help them. So now talking about Jesus and talking about the gospel is something that causes trauma? Does this apply to imams that come and speak about Islam in university campuses and college campuses? When they come on and they offend Christians and Jews and everyone else, do we have traumatic experience counselors for that? This is why our future, the future of our young people, is looking very abysmal, because men are not growing up to be men. They're growing up to be mice. And women are not growing up to be women. They're basically growing up to be offended people all the time, offended at this, offended at that. So speaking about Christ is now a traumatizing event. How did we get here? Again, in order to understand that, you need to understand the development and the rise of cultural Marxism, which is the nest of social justice. It's the nest of wokeism. It's the nest of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you scrabble those letters, DEI, you get DIE, die. Well, he goes on to say here, when my students witnessed a man, someone they grew up watching since they were kids, have his throat blown out with the 30-06 round at a college campus, much like our own doing, something that they are meant to be doing, nothing. They're expected to just take it in. He goes on to say, I've written, called, and pleaded with admins on campus to just say something. No return calls, no emails back, no invitations to talk about this, nothing. I had one email the day of telling me, because they know conservative students actually talk to me, that I can send students to the woke counselors in the diversity, equity, and belonging building on campus. Well, there it is. You can send them to the woke counselors, the diversity, equity, what I was talking about, and inclusion. Oh, and I got an email reminding me that if I'm going to identify myself as a professor, I need to add a variation of the disclaimer I left at the top of this comment. So now the professor has to watch what he's saying. He has to have a disclaimer. So he says, I am angry, I'm disappointed, I'm scared. And again, I'm going to leave that out. But when I got done with my lecture, which I intend on publishing, I did record it. Nearly every student came to me and shook my hand. One student, Korean, I believe, even gave me a bow. Why? Because these students, many of them have been traumatized by witnessing the death of Charlie Kirk. Anyone who saw the video of how he was killed, you cannot forget it. You cannot unthink it. It's in your memory banks. And so students who witnessed this online, or even those who were present at the campus in Utah, some of these students are dealing with this image. And no one is available to help them with this. All they're concerned about is, let's send them to counselors to tell them about why what Charlie Kirk said was wrong, why he was a homophobe, he was a racist, he was he was this or he was that. These kids need to be told the truth, not fed an ideological sandwich. These kids, he says, can be saved. There is so much potential in Generation Z, or Z, as you Americans put it. But if the only thing they hear from the institutions of higher learning is extremist propaganda from radical Marxists, many more Charlie Kirks are going to happen, and America will be extinct within the century. That's a chilling statement that he makes there, especially when you consider copycats. He goes on to say, tomorrow's another school week. I am going to continue to fight like hell, but I can't do this alone, though I need your help. And that is Professor Trevor Michael Tomish. Assistant professor, son, husband, brother. He's a Roman Catholic, unapologetically American, and the views, he says, are my own. So folks, this is where we are at this time in history. Did the shooting and killing of Charlie Kirk, did it surprise me? Not at all. I suspected something like this would happen. I just didn't expect it to happen so soon and in the way it did. And so when President Trump almost got shot, um, everyone recognized that no one's safe. No one is safe. And now there are death threats going around about other conservatives as well, like Matt Walsh and others. And so, folks, we need to understand that this young man, Tyler Robinson, his parents were Republican. They were conservatives. From my understanding, they were a Mormon family, and they were many in the leftist media were trying to say that, well, he was a MAGA, he was Republican. Remember, that's why uh, uh, Kimmel lost his job, because he's not. He became radicalized at the university. The universities have become hotbeds of Marxist ideology. I know this for a fact because a number of students have told me this as well. And he was radicalized. He was part of a socialist group in the Utah University. And when you keep hearing these these charges from the left, when you hear words like he's a fascist, fascist scum off our streets, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, he's a Nazi, when they keep hearing that mantra being repeated over and over and over and over in their head, well, what do they want to do? Well, they are being encouraged to do what? Well, they're being encouraged to take out Nazis. They're being encouraged to rid our streets of fascists. And we've seen how this violence has been going on under the noses of many Democratic politicians, even with a wink of their eye, that this somehow is acceptable behavior. When you hear people telling Americans to go into restaurants and force conservatives and Republicans out and shame them and their families in restaurants with the blessing of Democrat politicians, there is something wrong. There's something rotten to the core. And we are living now, folks. This is a turning point. And I know Charlie Kirk's ministry was Turning Point USA. It's not just a turning point, but we've now reached a stage in our history where this is a tipping point. And where that pendulum falls is going to determine the future of our country, whether it's the United States, Canada, England. The death of Charlie Kirk was such a martyrdom, and he died as a Christian. So he is a martyr who died for the sake of the gospel. He and his death have become a pivotal tipping point in history, in the history of the West. If they can do that to Charlie Kirk, they can do that to anyone. And so this ideology, which is not just Marxist, but from a Christian point of view, is antichrist. It is satanic. It is demonic. And I've said this before. I've been involved in apologetics for 40 years, and I've never seen the level of demonic and demonized people and their behaviors as I see now. I've never seen this before. Something's happening. And as Christians, we understand the demonic, the diabolical, the satanic background to all this, because that's where it spiritually rests. But it manifests itself in various ideologies that seek to destroy the Christian worldview that is set against the King, Jesus Christ. And it is set to not just destroy the Christian worldview, it's set to destroy the uniqueness of the human being as the image of God by destroying the importance of individuality and replacing it with group identity. So that what defines you is which group you're with. Are you with the oppressed group? Are you a white privileged male with you're part of the oppressed group, or are you the oppressor group rather? Excuse me, or are you with the oppressed group, the minority? Instead of seeing the fact that God made all humans in His image as equals, that no one is better than the other. No skin color is more important than the other. We are all made in God's image and we all have equal value. Well, what does cultural Marxism do? It wants to destabilize society. It wants to destabilize the sacredness of the family. And you've seen how they've done it. They've redefined the genders, whether it's male, female. They've basically argued that all forms of sexual expression are legitimate. And they have argued that we need to reconstruct, we need to get rid of this old Christian ideology and replace it with this Marxist idea where everyone is basically, in the end, everyone is popped out the same way. We all become just equals. But don't forget, there's always that oppressor group, and they need to pay for those sins, whether you call it reparations or whether you call it white guilt or whatever it may be. And so this is an insidious worldview. It is an insidious satanic movement that seeks to destabilize society, destabilize the church, destabilize government, and they will not stop until we wake up, until the church wakes up from her slumber and we take a stand for Christ and the gospel, stop receding into the shadows, and take a stand for Christ and his kingdom, because that ultimately is the cause of this rebellion. I just want to leave you with, it's just interesting that all of this that's been happening since Charlie Kirk's martyrdom and death, I want to mention my book, No King But Christ, The Collapse and Bankruptcy of Secular Worldviews. And this book discusses the very ideologies that led to the murder and martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. And I'm not jumping on the bandwagon here. I'm not taking the occasion of Charlie Kirk's death to prop myself or to prop my book or to promote my book, because as you could see in all my videos, I've been promoting my book at the end of each video. So this is not because of Charlie Kirk's death. I've been doing this for a while, even before Charlie Kirk was martyred. So the reason why I mentioned this book is because it deals with the situation that we're encountering in our society. It deals with the idea of what is social justice. It talks about the importance of the Imago Dei, the image of God, sexual identity. It talks about what is truth. It talks about God is the rightful sovereign, and God is the ground of moral absolutes and meaning. And there's also a whole chapter on Christ versus Antichrist and the systems and philosophies and ideologies and religions that are set against him. And so it speaks of the supremacy of Christ. And until we understand this, until we submit ourselves to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, this is the only answer to peace in the world, is to follow the Prince of Peace, to turn to him and to trust him. And in Christ, all those walls of hostility fall apart. So this book is available. It is available on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description box for the book, and you could get a copy of it. I would highly recommend getting this book. I would also recommend, even if you have Bible study groups, young people's, or well, teenagers, I guess. The book is not overly academic. It has been geared towards more of a lay person or a laity audience. And so, folks, I thank you again for tuning in. And Charlie's death really, really shook me up, and my wife as well. And we're still reeling. We're still reeling over the consequences and the after effects of this whole thing. Continue to pray for his family, pray for his wife, Erica, pray for the two little children who are now without a daddy, and pray for strength and clarity so that his wife Erica can continue the work that Charlie left behind. That she's actually been appointed as the new director, CEO of Turning Point USA. So do pray for her. And also, folks, get my book as well. This will really help you understand the idea of the whole cultural Marxist mindset and how it is geared towards the destruction of the West and Christianity. Its two main points, its two main areas to attack is the church, Christianity, and Judeo-Christian countries like the United States, Canada, and Britain. And you'll notice that most of this most of this turmoil is occurring precisely in the West. You don't see this in Africa, in the continent of Africa or continent of Asia. This is a Western phenomenon because they understand that the West is rooted in the Judeo-Christian principles. It's rooted in the view of Christ as King. And so, folks, I want to thank you again for joining. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. And like the video, share this video with others, and we'll see you next time. Take care. God bless.